All right, Ankur, I think we are good to go. We can
Yeah.
start. Ma'am, can we start?
Yeah.
Yeah,
Okay,
so
ma'am.
Ankur and Akshat,
I
we can
think
start. Okay.
I can share my screen, right?
Sure, ma'am, sure.
Uh,
Yes,
Yes,
ma'am.
ma'am. Share screen disabled here button. You'll have to allow me to share screen.
Is it enabled now?
Ah, ab theek hai.
Yes.
So, good afternoon, everyone. My name is Akshat, and on behalf of the Animal Law Cell, Faculty of Law, University of Delhi, I am delighted to welcome you to today's webinar on the topic Introduction to Animal Protection Issues. We are privileged to have with us Ms. Gauri Maulekhi, ma'am. Ma'am is a leading voice in animal welfare and a trustee of People for Animals, India's largest animal welfare organization. Ma'am has been at the forefront of groundbreaking reforms, from strengthening animal cruelty laws to improving conditions for animals in transportation and tackling illegal animal slaughters. Her efforts have been recognized with prestigious accolades, including the Nari Shakti Puraskar, India's highest civilian honor for women, awarded by the President of India. Her extensive legal expertise and activism have driven critical policy changes and inspired many to advocate for animal rights. It is an honor to have her with us. Without any further ado, let us welcome Ms. Gauri Maulekhi, ma'am. Over to you, ma'am.
Thank you, Akshat, and thank you to the cell under the leadership of Suranda ma'am to have organized this webinar in furtherance to our little interaction we had at the university just earlier this month. It's so heartening to see young people, giving their time to social causes such as animal welfare, which are not just for the love of animals, but also it's a responsible step forward. It's a responsible way of growing up uh, because it is deeply connected with our health. It's connected with the health of the environment and the planet, and it makes us better human beings. If we are kind and considerate to animals, we be kind and considerate in general. So I'll just take the thread from where we left our previous interactions. I'm sure some of you must have been participants in the conference held earlier. So most people, when it comes to animal welfare, just think about basically the animals that they see around them. It's usually the dogs and the cattle on the streets that we see, or some people sort of are attracted more to birds, etc., that we actually see and have in our environment. But the issue of abuse of animals, it runs much deeper, much deeper. There are issues that you're probably, if you're studying in a university, living in an urban environment, you would probably never encounter. But that doesn't mean that they don't exist. Today, we're going to talk about generally what is cruelty and what are the kinds of cruelties that are inflicted on animals. When I started, to work for animals, it was basically street dogs. And I thought, oh my God, inki halat kitni kharab hai. How can I make this better? How can I give treatment to an injured animal? How can I feed a hungry animal on the road? But it took me decades because at that time there was no structured learning mechanism on animal protection. There weren't people who would, other than Miss Menaka Gandhi, who's, Doordarshan aata tha us zamane mein, and we saw this, little, there were episodes of Heads and Tails and Menaka's Ark that spoke about animals and various issues that animals faced. That was probably, and some books were the only learning that we had. So today we're going to discover all those issues that you probably have not encountered in real life, but you will start discovering them. Once you know about them, I encourage you to go onto the net, find out a little more about these issues, see what pulls at your heartstrings most, because then in subsequent interactions with all of you, we will talk about how to resolve those issues, or what is happening in the country and in the world to resolve those issues. Some of them are gigantic problems, some of them are smaller problems, some of them we keep resolving on a year-to-year basis, some of them we've been fighting for decades and it's still not happened. So क्या कर रहे हैं वो बाद में, पहले देखते हैं कि क्या problems हैं. Let's expand our horizons beyond the world that we see around us. So I'm going to share my screen, start broadcast, and can you see my screen now?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. So what is cruelty? Basically, in law, cruelty is defined in the Prevention of Cruelty to Animals Act. That's where you take your definition of cruelty from. So cruelty is basically giving unnecessary pain and suffering to any animal. Any animal that is being treated in a way that is unnecessary. Ab unnecessary kya hai or necessary kya hai is also defined in the Prevention of Cruelty to Animals Act itself. So first, let's see what does Section 3 says of the Prevention of Cruelty to Animals Act. It says that it would be the duty of every person who has the care or charge of any animal to take all reasonable measures to ensure the well-being of such an animal and to prevent infliction upon such animal unnecessary pain and or suffering. So let's delve into it a little deeper. If you're not beating up a dog, but you've just tied it in a corner and you're not giving it food or water, would it be necessary pain and suffering or unnecessary pain and suffering? Ankur, can you probably answer for the rest of them? It will be unnecessary, yes. But if you are taking an animal for a surgery that it requires to have a tumor removed, and the animal is really not liking the fact that it's being given injections and put under a knife, would that be unnecessary or necessary pain and suffering? That would be necessary pain and suffering. So anything that is done for better management or giving veterinary care of the animal, it would be necessary pain and suffering. For instance, we pick up street dogs from the road and neuter them, animal birth control करते हैं उनके साथ, तो वो necessary pain and suffering में आ जाएगा. But अगर if you are, for instance, look at the picture, these animals are being taken for dog meat trade, probably that would be unnecessary pain and suffering, because that is not provision for in law. There is no exception for such suffering in law, and it's completely avoidable. Hence, this would be unnecessary pain and suffering. So every person who either owns an animal or has charge of an animal, for instance, I own a dairy, but I'm the owner of the dairy, but I'm traveling, so I've given the charge of it to my helper. So my helper has charge of the animal. Anybody who has charge of the animal or is owner of the animal has to ensure that unnecessary pain and suffering nahi ho. So Section 11(1), subsection 1 of Section 11 lists all the kinds of sufferings that can be unnecessary and are punishable by law. In fact, it's so wide that it says any manner in which an animal is made to suffer. Section 11(1)(a) is extremely wide. Any method by which an animal is given any kind of inconvenience or suffering would be punishable by law. It's another thing that the consequences are very light, but Section 11 basically lists everything. So the thumb rule is that if you think that a suffering that an animal is undergoing is avoidable and is unnecessary, it would fit into one or the other clauses of Section 11 subsection 1. beating and kicking an animal, keeping an animal hungry or thirsty, keeping an animal confined in a very small area, not walking a dog enough, making animals fight with each other for the purposes of gambling or whatever, shooting animals or mutilating animals. Everything is covered in Section 11, subsection 1, as kinds of unnecessary sufferings. Now, Section 11, subsection 3 makes exemptions for necessary sufferings. Necessary sufferings such as dehorning, castration of animal, or killing of animals for food for mankind. Now this is a sort of it's a debate that went on in the parliament when this bill, the Prevention of Cruelty to Animals bill, was introduced in the parliament. At that time, a big debate happened, and there was Rukmini Devi Arundale, who was a member of parliament, who introduced the bill. She and many others wanted to remove this particular clause and to make India a vegetarian country. But since we are such a diverse country and we have so many different cultures, a lot of cultures did not uphold the concept of vegetarianism, and they said that let's have an exception in this act that killing an animal for the food for mankind will not be cruelty, provided that such killing is not accompanied with unnecessary pain and suffering. मतलब वो किलिंग भी बिल्कुल स्विफ्ट होना चाहिए और एज पर प्रोटोकॉल होना चाहिए, वो प्रोटोकॉल रूल्स में आता है और वो प्रोटोकॉल्स दूसरे एक्ट्स में भी डिस्क्राइब्ड है. बट if the killing of dogs, if the killing of animals for food for mankind is as per rules and regulations, then it would not be a violation of law. That's the crux of it. So a lot of people say कि Prevention of Cruelty to Animals Act है, तो फिर हम जानवरों को मीट शॉप्स में क्यों देखते हैं? Why do they get slaughtered in slaughterhouses and all of that? So this is where the exception has been created. Of course, there are other exceptions also. There are exceptions to deal with the dog population on the streets. There are exceptions to for husbandry practices such as dehorning, castration, etc. For cattle, which are again used for tamed for agricultural purposes, but even that has to be done in a prescribed manner. Now, prescribed manner kabhi bataya hi nahi gaya tha 1960 ke baad se. So only in 2023 the prescribed manner was then notified as a set of rules under Prevention of Cruelty to Animals Act. So it's constantly an evolving act. Other than the penalties, everything else has evolved quite a bit in this act, and cruelties have been expanded in keeping with the new kinds of cruelties that humans are probably the wickedest species. We are inflicting new kinds of cruelties on animals. So another one thing that before we go into issues is important to understand is the responsibility. Who basically is responsible for cruelty to animals? One is, of course, the individual that is, basically inflicting some kind of cruelty to any animal, beating up or keeping hungry or smuggling or slaughtering, mutilating, overdriving, overriding, making a sick animal work. All of those are individual cruelties. But then now is the time that people need to understand that there are industrial cruelties that happen to animals. There are whole industries dependent on being cruel to animals. So, for instance, the egg industry thrives on keeping 40 crore hens in battery cages. Battery cages are intrinsically cruel to animals. Hence, the entire egg industry, mostly, more than 90% of eggs in India come from hens which are kept in battery cages. So that entire industry is cruel. Then there is a dairy industry which has intrinsic cruelties such as use of oxytocin, and then there's full-time tethering, etc., etc. So there are intrinsic cruelties which are industrial in nature, and it's not that you have basically just one individual being an anomaly. The anomaly is the regime. That's basically the idea. So responsibility is sometimes with the regime or sometimes with the individual as well. Now let's see what are the different facets. This is okay. Um, Making animals fight is something that probably was a very medieval kind of a sport. It would be unfair or untrue to call it a sport in today's day and age. Nobody in their right mind should seek entertainment out of watching animals fight each other to death. Animals usually don't fight each other to death, other than in very, very wild or natural circumstances for natural reasons. But when they are made to fight with each other by inducing aggression into them, and then making an entertainment event out of them and gambling or whatever, mostly it is for gambling reasons, then such an event would be a violation. In fact, it's a cognizable violation of Section 11(1)(n) of the Prevention of Cruelty to Animals Act. Now, this is not just confined to cockfighting in Andhra Pradesh, like you can see on your screen. It is also in Punjab. For instance, dog fighting happens in Punjab. You can read about it on so many social media posts where shamelessly and blatantly people invite people to come and gamble at dog fight events. Whenever it comes to our notice, we make complaints and whatever. But like I said, it's a cognizable offense, yet very rampant in its occurrence across the country. In Assam, buffalo bulls are made to fight, and there it is connected with some religious practice also during Makar Sankranti, and of course people liberally gamble during such events. They also have bulbuls fighting, those little pretty birds. They are made to fight in Assam in temples, and again something related to Sankranti, which is 14th of January, and gambling events are held over there. In Pakistan also, there are bears which are declawed and their fangs are removed, and they are made to fight with several dogs, and of course, the end of all species, whichever both sides of animals, is almost certain. One dies first and the other dies later. But for the purpose of gambling, it serves their goal. SAE, these kind of fights are organized, were organized in olden times in the Roman Empire. In the Colosseum, these gladiators and whatever not. Just give me 1 minute. 1 second. I'm going to step away from the screen for just a moment. And I'm back. You can see my screen, right? Huh. So it is from there that this bloodthirst and aggression-seeking behavior sort of got to be called as culture. But there are theories that probably in the aqueducts in the Roman Empire, there was too much lead coming into the water of the Romans, and that is what sort of messed up with their neurology and somehow induced a lot of undue aggression in them. And that's what lead poisoning sometimes does. We also have a hugely polluted environment, which could be contributing to the rise in aggression and violence in our societies. And making animals fight is because they cannot retaliate, they cannot complain. They're probably the silent victims of our aggression without any consequence to any human being. So this kind uh, of a violation or cruelty is easily tackleable. One can make complaints whenever one comes across such events, but most people remain silent and even more actually encourage it. So dog fights, your bull fight, these are all induced. Animals are for weeks and months tortured before the fight to make them, kill each other in the arena. So besides the slaughter of animals, which is the biggest killer of animals in the world, the second largest killer of animals across the world is animal experimentation. Use of animals in laboratories is rampant, while the science is not really very good on animal testing or animal dissection. So basically it's three things for which animals are used in laboratories. One is for education, where animals are dissected to show what kind of anatomy they have. Second is research, to basically prove the toxicity or the efficacy of any particular chemical, and then to develop it for various kinds of drugs or household products even. And the third is, of course, testing. Just testing of any finished product to see what effect it would have on animals and to what level its toxicity is, so that the labeling can be proper. Now, these are wholly avoidable with the new alternatives that we have, which yield even better results for humans, because if a drug has really worked on mice or rabbits or guinea pigs, there is no guarantee that it would give the same results on humans. But if you have the human genes on a microchip and you are able to test your drugs on that, your results would be much better. There are also now mannequins and simulations which have replaced animal use in laboratories to a very large extent, but much more needs to be done. What we have currently been able to achieve is probably just a drop in the ocean. Something that we did in 2016 was to stop cosmetic testing on animals. Earlier, shampoos and creams would be tested on animals to the extent. There's a very wicked test called LD50. Probably you should read about it. So LD is lethal dose. So you use a chemical or any particular thing that you want to add to your drug or cosmetic. You keep putting it, subjecting the animals to it, to the extent that half the animal population dies. And then you determine your toxicity level from there. So LD50 is an extremely wicked. And then there is something called a Dre's test, where you put whatever chemicals you want to use in cosmetics, etc., in the eyes of rabbits. You force the eyes open with those pincers, and then you put the chemical in it, and then you wait to see the reaction from the eyes of the rabbit. It's just so wicked that somehow, thankfully, testing of cosmetics on animals has stopped. India has also notified that import of cosmetics which have been tested on animals will not be allowed. But again, much more needs to be done for drugs that are developed using animals. Even snake venom, like another one issue that I'm just throwing out there for people to learn more about on their own also. Snake venom is injected in horses, and then their blood is drawn out after a while, and an anti-venom is isolated from that blood. So horses, when they are kept, some of these horses are retired from the army or from the Indo-Tibetan border police or some, paramilitary force, etc. And these horses which have served the country as heroes get tortured with snake venom. Some of the videos that you will probably find online will show you that when they just see that injection coming to them, the venom injection coming to them, they almost fall down with grief, and they try and struggle to get away from it, but there is no respite for them. In fact, some of the horses, most of the horses, because these drug companies are so greedy, are injected with undue amounts of venom. The pain is unthinkable in these animals, and then an undue amount of blood is drawn out of them, leaving their lives cut to a minimum, so that just the profits of these companies can be maximized. Again, they have huge amounts of privileges, the drug companies, and then they always claim that the anti-venom available in the country is very little compared to the demand, and hence they have to push the thing a little more and have more and more horses be induced with such cruelty and pain. So all of this experimentation is basically killing the second largest number of animals in the world. Another very, very avoidable cruelty that we subject on animals is the breeding industry. Breeding animals for pets, whether it's dogs or cats or it's birds, budgerigars and lovebirds, which people like to keep, and most don't have the ability or the amount of care that they require. They have no capacity to give that care, and these animals suffer and die. But what happens to them during breeding is unthinkable. The use of rape stands for dogs to, female dogs are tied to rape stands and subjected to mating, forcible mating. It's just very grueling, the conditions that they undergo. Their babies are taken away as soon as the buyer is found. Back-to-back pregnancies. Now, dogs come on heat twice or thrice a year, and on every heat they are subjected to pregnancy. So all nutrients from their body are constantly being utilized to make babies. And of course, inbreeding and line breeding is very, very common. Incest breeding, mothers being forced to mate with offsprings, and siblings being forced to mate with each other, which then causes genetic problems with the puppies that are then sold off to people. These are extremely unnecessary, especially in a country which has more than 4 crore homeless animals. Any person can simply give a home to a homeless animal rather than encourage these cruel breeding practices, where, another one thing I discovered while I was working with breeders, just a second. So most demand is for male puppies and male cats, but there are little or no finders for female ones. So if the breeder gives away the females for free or just leaves them be, then, he doesn't want to spoil the market. He doesn't want to have too many people with females who would then breed and spoil his unique position in the market. So hence they either live bury them or just drown them in a bucket of water and kill them, because they just don't want excess dogs of that certain breed, which would, disturb their uniqueness in the market and the rarity of the breed that they are wanting to appeal to gullible consumers. So anybody who buys an animal, even if it's, most people think that, okay, probably if agar kisi ke ghar mein paida ho rahe hain to koi baat nahi. But, only the breeding farms are bad. Well, India doesn't have breeding farms. All of the breeding that happens in India is in these backyard types, or they are stuffed in a flat. There's so many places in Delhi where there are flats full of dogs. There would be like 30, 40 female dogs breeding in a dirty little flat. They would never have gone out for a walk ever. They would just be tied to the floor. There would be rings on the floor, those metal rings to which they would be tied. And they live their sorry lives over there, only to be killed. If they are lucky, they are euthanized properly. Otherwise, they're just killed by the end of the breeding cycle because the breeder sees no commercial value in them. So it happens to cats, it happens to dogs, it happens to hamsters and rabbits, etc. Buying animals as pets is probably a completely avoidable cruelty that we continue to inflict on these animals. Now, I'm going to club tens of crores of animals in this one subheading, which is called intensive animal farming. Now, India had its farming practices. We had cows and goats and hens and buffaloes from eons, thousands of years we've been rearing them. But only in the past few decades, since after independence, when we had our food security was not guaranteed, we were a country that was deficient in protein, and we thought that okay, growing large number of animals should solve this problem. And then the white revolution came and the pink revolution came, and all of these nonsense revolutions just basically focused on killing more and more animals. And now it's become like a monstrous giant that is difficult to deal with. And this is basically one such industrial cruelty that has also sort of captured the regulatory regime. The regulator is making laws. I mean, the lawmakers are making laws to not just laws, but also giving money through schemes and benefits, etc., to propagate more and more of this. So you have hens in battery cages, you have cattle that are tethered lifelong, and at the end of their commercially viable life, they are sent to slaughter, which indeed adds more to the GDP of the country, because we are also the largest exporters of beef in the world, which is basically all a byproduct of the dairy industry. So it's intricately connected. Like in Western countries, cattle are grown for beef. In India, all the cattle that goes to beef is basically a discard from the dairy industry. In fact, dairy farmers don't even wait for a cow or a buffalo to stop giving milk before they send them to slaughter. It is just when feeding them does not become viable because the amount of milk decreases, that's when, or when the cattle becomes sick and treating it would become commercially unviable, they would just simply send it for slaughter. And that's why, this kind of intensive agriculture, even these egg-laying hens, we have some, in fact, at our sanctuary. Also, sometimes at our office, we find these rescued little chicks coming over. In the egg-laying industry, they are killed at 1.5 years of age, but that's not the end of their life. If allowed, they can live up to 6-7 years and die of old age. But these animals don't get the luxury of old age ever. They just die when the industry requires them to basically get lost. This is how pigs are kept in gestation crates, unable to get up, unable to turn around, unable to move, basically so that piglets don't get mixed up, and it's easy to accommodate more pigs in less space. So gestation crates or farrowing crates are extremely cruel. They are violative of Section 11(1)(e) of the Prevention of Cruelty to Animals Act, like we discussed earlier. Keeping an animal in a very small cage or receptacle that does not allow it enough movement, reasonable movement, is violative. But we see it rampantly. 90 lakh pigs in the country are subjected to this kind of treatment. So when I think of what these pigs or these birds are subjected to, तो कदम चल नहीं सकते. They are extremely intelligent creatures. They can count, they can communicate, they have moods, they have personalities, each one of them. मगर ये चल नहीं सकते. इनको आज़ादी नहीं है और इनको they're kept only for the purpose of their meat or their skin or their eggs or their milk. Then you compare it to a street dog that probably does not get enough attention from humans, but at least has the freedom to go move around, to discover its own opportunities on the road. It seems that the suffering of these animals is incomparable to anything. We're just extracting commercial benefits out of crores of these animals, while 99% of animal welfare organizations even, or people who worry about animals, confine themselves to just animals around them. एक पिग की क्या गलती है कि उसकी सफरिंग किसी ने देखी नहीं है? एक मुर्गी की क्या गलती है कि लोग कहते हैं अंडा भी वेजिटेरियन होता है, तो अंडा खाने में कोई बुराई नहीं है. This is where it comes from. So it's just that the lack of information with people makes them more compassionate towards I mean, they are compassionate, but they don't know where to focus their actions towards. So some actions could probably benefit these creatures as well, or these, fish, which are, again, in certain cultures are called vegetarian. A fish meat is vegetarian. ये तो खा ही सकते हैं, because a fish is not even considered sentient. Well, fish have the ability to suffer, and they gasp for every breath of air once they are removed from the water. That was their life. But again, we've become sort of hard-hearted towards them. Hard-hearted to the extent that हम fish को numbers में भी count नहीं करते, हम इनको tonnage में count करते हैं. Imagine if somebody were to do that to humans. Imagine if, the Holocaust that happened, people were not counted, the Jews were not counted in numbers, but in tonnage. How offensive would that be? And how offensive can we get to another species that lives on our planet just because it's weaker than us? We treat them like this. Like, imagine if the slaves in Southern America who were working on cotton plantations were to be treated like this. What amazing amount of offense that would have been to entire humanity. Why is the same offense not taken when a small little fish, for no fault of its own, is grown by force, kept in dirty ponds, fed human sewage, which is, by the way, common food for fish. That's what aquaculture does. पैसे बचाने के लिए हम उनको fish feed क्यों खिलाएं? हम उनको human feces खिला देते हैं और बहुत सारा antibiotic भी डाल देंगे उसमें, तो वो मरेगी भी नहीं. So human feces and antibiotic खिलाकर हमें फिश को पालते हैं. उसके बाद एक दिन अपनी मर्जी के हिसाब से we decide that the fish needs to come out of water and go to the basically slaughter, go to slaughter. अब या तो वो खुद ही gasp kar ke mar jati hai, which is, suffocation is the worst kind of death that can be given to any creature. Even suffocating to death for humans is one of the worst kind of. They are not stunned. They are not, given any painless kind of death. In certain areas where live fish are sold in markets, at meat shops, the fish are just slammed against a rock. उनको पटक के पत्थर के ऊपर मारा जाता है, and then their flesh is sold, and people are actually, who are buying that flesh, stand there and watch, and they are fine with it, because that's how dehumanized they have become. That's how hard their hearts have become. But the regulator, which was supposed to basically ensure that the provisions of the Prevention of Cruelty to Animals Act even extend to fish, has till date remained silent on it. There is no regulation on fish farms at all. There is no framework of law to prevent fish from any kind of suffering in India. So anybody can open a fish farm, start doing whatever they want with fish. They would probably get subsidies and schemes from the government to encourage this industry, but nothing to regulate their cruelty. If you look at the definition of animals in the Prevention of Cruelty to Animals Act, you'd see that it's extremely broad. In fact, it's the same definition in BNS also. The definition of animals includes all creatures other than human beings. So all creatures would not only include fish, but also, in theory, include insects. But we focus so much on vertebrates. We focus so much on land animals that we just forget that there are others in our environment that are capable of suffering. And this is what, people like you who are studying the law, who are going to be the future of our country, you need to keep this in mind when you think of animal cruelty or about solutions. When you're thinking about solutions, this is what you need to think of. Think of the lowest of the low. Think of the miserablest of the miserable. Think of the ones that are at the bottom of the privilege ladder. They don't have anybody even treating them as sentient beings. So those are the ones deserving of the maximum attention, but unfortunately, that's not the case. We have prepared, lots of reports on dairies, what kind of cruelty happens in dairies. In fact, the Ahimsa Fellowship that I was earlier talking about has made a detailed report of the dairy conditions in Delhi. I would encourage some of you to even watch the proceedings of the dairy matter in the Delhi High Court and the Supreme Court, which are going on simultaneously. Dairy is next to landfills, animals eating garbage, leading to aflatoxin coming out in their milk, aflatoxin being a carcinogen, which then being consumed by people and causing more and more misery and disease in our bodies as well. Since we are practically lactose intolerant, we don't need the milk of other species to survive as adults. We just do it because we like the taste of it, and it's something that is wholly avoidable. But even if one were to use it, which one is legally allowed to, there are regulatory regimes for cattle which should be enforced to ensure that these cattle don't undergo suffering. Currently, artificial insemination, just look at the kind of quacks that go out, jhola chhap people, not veterinarians, shoving their hands into the vaginas of cattle, making them pregnant sometimes, but most times actually causing them more injury and causing sterility, which is why the cattle are sent to slaughterhouse even sooner than they should have. anyway, their lives are not any worse than death. Their lives are basically worse than death because they are kept tethered in one place. वहीं पे 1.5 foot के chain में they just suffer their entire lives. They are injected with oxytocin, etc. So Delhi has 9 designated dairy areas according to the MCD's dairy policy, which you can look up on the net. These 9 dairy areas are basically hellholes. I would encourage some of you on a free day, whenever you want, go pay a visit to Ghazipur Dairy or Bhalaswa Dairy or Nangli or Kakrula or Madanpur Khadar dairies, and you will see where milk is coming from and from what kind of animals are we squeezing it out, and whether after looking at piles of dead calves and miserable cows and buffaloes, you would still want to either, you can change it as an individual by changing your choices, or you can change it by interacting with governments, interacting with lawmakers, and pushing for better enforcement. So we are doing a lot of work on dairy and would love to discuss it in a specific dedicated session, probably sometime later. Pet shops we have seen, like it's connected with the breeding issue. The Law Commission of India came up with a brilliant report on pet shops, which helped us in a matter which we had taken to the Delhi High Court. And Delhi High Court asked the central government to notify rules on pet shops. That is why these rules finally came out. The Pet Shop Rules 2018 and Dog Breeding Rules 2017. While the rules have been there, like I said, since 2017 and 18, under our own noses in Delhi, not one pet shop is licensed or registered, and therefore all pet breeding or pet sale in Delhi is illegal. So we've taken the matter to court again, and now some positive steps have been taken by the government, but a lot more complaints need to be given to the government because strangely and absurdly, on the previous date, the Delhi government told the High Court, the Chief's bench, that there are no breeders in Delhi. Made a categorical statement that there are no breeders in Delhi. In fact, it's been recorded in the court's order that it's a contention that they are not willing to accept, that there are no dog breeders in Delhi. Of course, just a mere Google search will show you that there are hundreds, if not more. So now we are preparing lists, all our teams are preparing lists of these breeders and giving to the government, but we need many, many more people to start talking about pet shops and breeders in Delhi, which are currently completely unregulated and must come under the regulatory regime of the central rules that have been made under PC Act. For tourism, a lot of cruelty happens on animals. Basically, sometimes in temples you'll see elephants which are tamed, basically in the most cruel manner, beaten up, broken, made to, breaking a wild animal to obey commands is in itself a very, very cruel process, which most of the times happens in Assam. In some places in Kerala and Karnataka also, a lot of breaking of elephants has started happening by putting them in corrals, which are corral is almost like a battery cage. Extremely restrictive, not giving them food, beating them up every now and then so that the elephant breaks and finally agrees to the commands of the Mahawat. Besides this, there are horse breeding that happens in many places in UP because horses and mules are then used for religious tourism in Kedarnath, in Hemkund Sahib, in Yamunotri, etc., and Vaishno Devi, many places. Or just purely, not religious, but purely tourism places such as Pahalgam and one of those Matheran and Mount Abu kind of places, or Nainital, where people want to go and ride horses for some absurd reason. So lots of horses and elephants and camels undergo huge amounts of cruelty because of that. The wildlife, I feel, is just, we've destroyed it to the extent that it's almost irrecoverable now. There used to be continuous stretches of forest from Jammu Kashmir to Assam at one point, and animals had free, movement and large gene pools. Herds of animals would meet other herds of animals. In fact, there are recorded evidences of elephants from Uttarakhand traveling all the way to Assam and then coming back. Those seasonal migrations used to happen of entire herds, and they would meet other elephants, whatever. So the gene pool was very large, and by a large gene pool, they could actually have very strong progeny. But now the forests are so badly fragmented, so many urban and rural civilizations have come up that, anyway, their movement is restricted. And also the thrust of factory farming, of dairies and poultry farms, whatever, is pushing more and more into the forests. Informed opinion that there is no coming back. But if we could only let these animals suffer a lot less by not increasing demand for wildlife articles and wild animals, and reporting or taking concrete steps in dealing with such cruelty, they would probably suffer a lot less while on their way out. Now, India is a very typical country when it comes to transport of animals. In most Western countries where there is no religious significance of cattle, they are slaughtered at the farm, or there are abattoirs at adjacent to farms where they are reared for milk and meat, and then they are slaughtered in farms, in abattoirs or slaughterhouses adjacent to those farms. In India, we have this immense hypocrisy that we have those state acts basically disallowing slaughter of animals. They are varied in their provisions. The state acts sometimes allow the slaughter of male buffaloes or male cows का जो male counterpart होता है, and bulls. Or Maharashtra, for instance, had a provision that cattle above 12 years of age can be slaughtered, but then cattle koi aadhar card leke to ghumte nahi hai. It's unenforceable, that provision. You don't know what the age of the cattle is. At whatever the farmer is saying, you have to agree to that. Even the provision for tagging cattle and having those bar-coded and unique identification numbers granted to them through tags is not mandatory by law. So it is just done on some cattle and not done on most. So it's very difficult to enforce these state acts for prevention of slaughter. And even if you prevent slaughter, there isn't enough infrastructure to house them post their commercial life and dairies. So there is no place to keep them. There are some random NGOs that have gaushalas, which are also badly maintained mostly. So the only thing that where they get sucked is this illegal slaughter from all of the North Indian states towards Bangladesh and from all the South Indian states towards Kerala. So this kind of an exodus that happens, this mass exodus, all these animals that you can see in your picture were once being used for milk production in some dairy. Probably that milk was packaged by Varka or Mahananda or Amul or Mother Dairy or Parag or one of those milk companies, and then finally served to some unsuspecting person who thought that को तो बहुत ही खेत में चरती हुई किसी बहुत ही बढ़िया सी गाय के पास से उसका मिल्क आया है, and he must have had tea with it. But this is what happened to that cow after she was not commercially viable for that dairy. They're going straight to a very, very cruel slaughter either in Kerala or in West Bengal or beyond West Bengal in Bangladesh, because these are the two states, Kerala and West Bengal, that have little or no regulation on slaughter at all. So, in fact, I was working in Kerala for some time, 2013, 14, 15, and we encountered something called hammer slaughter over there. Hammer slaughter is where they just take a hammer and they crack open the skull of a living cow to the extent that, it's the most absurd and the most manpower intensive exercise to kill the animal, which I could not understand. Why would they do it? But they have a feeling, they have a belief that the meat of the cattle becomes more tasty if they torture the animal before killing it. So something called hammer slaughter you can check out on YouTube. Those videos are extremely disturbing and graphic, but information is power. Get that information and then get the power to do something about it. I have already spoken about a lot of people who are not veterinarians, because this country has very few veterinarians and a very archaic veterinary education system. Like, for instance, you guys are studying in a law college, your university is progressive, you get the best exposure to what is happening internationally, you have the, your syllabus is updated, you are basically abreast with the new learnings, with the new landmarks of jurisprudence in the country. But that's not how the veterinary colleges operate. Veterinary colleges have the same old 30-40 saal purana syllabus. While it was revised in 2016, only bits and pieces of it were improved. But again, this is a field of medicine, veterinary medicine, and there are advances being made in other countries on a daily basis, if not weekly. Weekly basis, if not daily. So the veterinary education in India is basically archaic and centered around production only. And hence there are very few veterinarians who have the skill and the ability to, do disease diagnosis or surgeries. But a large number of people, because we also have the largest number of cattle in the world, right? तो उतने veterinarians तो है नहीं, तो सब झोला छाप people just go around shoving hands into cattle, setting bones, doing operations, getting themselves being, could probably be a 10th pass or a 10th fail, basically treating animals in a village, and the gaonwala would probably, or whoever is keeping these animals would probably prefer this guy to a veterinarian, because this guy would come cheaper, उसको कम पैसे देने पड़ेंगे, तो ठीक है. Street animals, yes, major problem of street animals in the country, but we know most of these issues, they feed on plastic. The cattle are basically, again, discards from dairy, so it's all connected. डेयरी से बाहर छोड़ दिया, सुबह शाम कभी टेम्पररी अबैंडनमेंट किया तो सुबह शाम डेयरी में बुलाकर उनको दूध निकाल लिया, कभी परमानेंट अबैंडनमेंट कर दिया तो फिर उसको किसी ट्रक के नीचे या गाड़ी के आगे आ जाने के लिए या प्लास्टिक खा के मर जाने के लिए छोड़ दिया. Of course, dogs suffer a lot. If they are not neutered, the female dogs get chased by 20, 30 male dogs who get aggressive for mating. Then she suffers from, various kinds of STDs and makes babies and watches them die either out of hunger or in accidents. It's just a life of complete misery on the streets. Slaughterhouses I will probably cover um, in another session. I would keep some time now for uh, interaction. Let me take some questions. So, like I said, the issues are way too many. I have been able to touch upon some of the issues, but there are many more. Working animals. We've not spoken about a lot of other issues also, which you will discover. But let's start from here and let me hear some of your thoughts or questions.
Good evening, ma'am, and everyone present here. Ma'am, basically, I have four questions. First being, education and awareness is the only tool to make compassion to reach to hearts of the people. But, ma'am, how can the wall of religion, ignorance, custom rituals be broken where oblation?
Be
Be in
broken.
it be it in any form, bali or kurbani, silks and leathers are considered as the material of rituals. Meat is considered as the primary source of protein, which isn't. So, how can we cope up with such mindset?
Basically by carrot and stick. So I have been able to deal with such an issue in my home state in Uttarakhand. There used to be a lot of animal sacrifice. By working with the government, by securing orders from the Honorable High Court, by then going to, from village to village and holding meetings, making people understand, we were able to root it out. But it requires consistent effort. Let me tell you, every religion is almost like a Nazi when it comes to treatment of animals. There is no religion that is really great for animals. Even in Jainism, there is a religious mandate, or at least that's what people say, of using the feathers of peacock to do the jharu, national bird hai. But even in the Wildlife Protection Act, there is an exception made for peacock feathers not to be covered, and therefore, with that loophole, large number of peacocks are killed to pluck their feathers out for sale, and then of course everybody is a consumer. So it requires a lot of awareness, which is why I'm always happy to talk to young people like you. And our entire team makes every effort to do awareness programs uh, to make people aware that while there are some things that were said in religious texts hundreds of years ago, they don't apply in today's day and age. We have come to a point where we've evolved enough to understand कि जानवर को मारने से किसी का लड़का पैदा नहीं होता. But कुछ लोग अभी भी ये सोचते हैं. In fact, our teams have just come back from Gauri where lakhs of animals anyway got slaughtered because that's beyond our control. It's in another country's jurisdiction. But we did what we could. We went, met the president, prime minister of Nepal. We went, met, the temple committee. We even got them to come over here to our country to hold press conferences in our country, using the stick more than the carrot. and announced that they will stop doing animal sacrifice, but who can hold them to their word in another country? So we worked with the Sashastra Seema Bal in our country. We worked with the Bihar government. We put out posters. We educated villagers. And finally, at the end of the day, when they were trying to cross the border with animals, we stopped the animals. We got the animals seized. Some 400 or so animals have been sent to Vantara now to keep for lifelong care. बट ये नंबर जो सीज हुआ ये अनप्रेसिडेंटेड था. हम पिछले साल 5 साल पहले इतने नंबर्स नहीं सीज कर पाए थे. प्रॉबेबली नेक्स्ट ईयर और कम एनिमल सैक्रिफाइस होंगे और ज्यादा रेस्क्यू होंगे. एंड एक दिन करके we'll get there. The key is persistence and the key is lateral thinking. There is no one golden key to open this lock. You have to use many methods of getting there, because religion is something that gets entrenched in our DNA, and most people जिनको आप बोले कि ऐसा नहीं करना चाहिए, वो बोलेंगे कि आप कौन होता है, हमें ज्यादा पता है, ये हो जाएगा, वो हो जाएगा. All kinds of beliefs they have. So using the law, using education, using coercion, using whatever that it takes, using the government, using regulatory systems, using environmental law, not just cruelty law, using food safety laws. It takes everything. You need a full quiver of arrows to deal with such a situation. Not any one thing. Yeah.
Thank you very much. Okay. Thank you very much, ma'am. May I proceed with my second question?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Ma'am, my second question is, the laws you mentioned just now, that is PCA, will you please tell the effectiveness of those laws and where we can end up with such laws?
Well, PCA is the only act that we have which is an omnibus act on cruelty. Clearly, the violations are punishable with very little, but we are working towards having that improved by approaching lawmakers. In fact, a lot of members of parliament have now started speaking up about having the penalties amended. In fact, 2022, the government of India has also come out with a PCA amendment bill, which is very progressive and has a graded system of penalties for injuring or killing an animal, and also addresses industrial animal agriculture to some extent. Now, this act helps us in many ways. For instance, when there is cruelty such as animal sacrifice, why would the court rule against animal sacrifice? Because there are provisions in PCA disallowing it. Why would animal fights be disallowed anywhere? Because there are provisions of PCA. Why would experimentation require registration with the CPCSEA, which is a body that registers all laboratories in the country? Because it's provided in the PCA. So we need to not only look at the PCA for its faults, but look at the PCA creatively for its assets. Under the Prevention of Cruelty to Animals Act, you have a brilliant set of rules. You require every pet shop to be registered. You require every dog breeder to be registered, all farriers to be registered, all cattle premises or dairies to be registered. You require all case property animals to be kept, the victims to be kept in shelter homes and not given back to the accused person like any property would. Like if my car gets impounded, it would be given back to me in my custody, right? But according to the provisions of CRPC or BNSS, but BSNS or whatever. But under the special act, which is Prevention of Cruelty to Animals Act, the animal which is a victim is not treated like property. It's treated like a victim and therefore accorded the safety of a shelter rather than being returned to the abuser, who is the owner. So once you understand the depth of the PCA, you can use it very well. People who superficially touch it find it useless. Next question.
Thank you, ma'am. my third and the last question is, ma'am, you mentioned Western countries while telling about transportation of livestock animals. Ma'am, is it not economic conditions which are more responsible for livestock condition or be it any animals in our country? And of course, hypocrisy is there, but maybe less responsible. What do you think, ma'am?
So if no, the question is not the economic condition of the farmer. The question is that there are externalization of cost. Hmm? For instance, milk that you get for 50 rupees per liter should not be 50 rupees per liter. It should probably be 300 rupees per liter. And the farmer should include the cost of giving of production of that milk. Should include the cost of rearing the animal post its retirement. But the milk companies or the giants or the cooperatives such as Amul or Varka or Mahananda or Mother Dairy or Parag or Sachi or all of these, which are state cooperative milk cooperatives, find it better to generate demand by keeping the price low. So it is a very, very human manufactured condition. It is not about the poverty of the farmer. He can very well claim the true price of milk. Now, if you do a true cost estimation of eggs or milk, they should not be sold at the price at which they are sold. And the consumer, which is not a poor person, should be absorbing the cost, which then should go into giving the farmer whatever he requires to keep that cattle lifelong. But again, there isn't enough pressure and people want the cheapest product. So if you want a cheap product, who will pay the price? The cattle will pay the price.
Ma'am, may I
Thank you.
intervene
It's
or
a
kind of
very
add something to it?
it's a longer, it's a very deeper subject. It's you basically apply the precautionary principle and the polluter pays principle on the dairies to actually arrive at this. We've made out a case for it, and we are interacting with the authorities on this. That basically the milk companies have the burden, should bear the burden of responsibly disposing the cattle rather than leaving it for municipal corporations or NGOs to look after, because they are not involved in the production of these cattle or the commercial use of these cattle. So they should be factored into the cost of production, and that cost of production should be passed on to the consumer. अगर आपको दूध पीने का इतना शौक है तो 300 रुपए का खरीदिए, और जिससे कि वो पैसा कैटल के रख रखाव में जा सके, जो भी उनको प्रोड्यूस कर रहा है वो उनको रख सके. So that's the logic which is thrown out of the window when you want more production and more demand. Yes, Neha, you were saying something.
Ma'am, I have a kind of a reservation to this point, and the point is we have to look at the socioeconomic condition of India as well. When we say the milk is going to be around 300 rupees per liter, not everyone can afford it. And I agree with the point that milk is not necessary for our survival. Of course, it is not. But it has become a kind of part of diet from like ages. It will take some time for us to kind of remove it from a diet. It's a movement that we have started. Definitely, we should take it with more force. But to remove milk from the diet altogether for entire India, or to make it milk so expensive that no one can afford it, or at least majority of 90% of the population in India cannot afford it, how correct it would be, I have reservations on that.
How correct is it? I'll answer that. How correct is it to have milk being consumed by people, which is completely substandard because there is no regulation on it? Cattle, because of externalization of cost, are being fed with moldy, dirty food or garbage, which is basically what most of the cattle, because nutritious food feed is rarely given to cattle in dairies. In Delhi, in fact, you will see it in one of the orders, interim orders of the Delhi High Court. There were tests done on milk available in Delhi by the Food Safety and Standards Authority of India, where more than 50% of the samples were turned out to be substandard, and most of them had aflatoxins. Aflatoxins are carcinogens. And on several levels that milk was substandard. more than 50% of the milk samples collected by FSSAI was found to be substandard. It's recorded in the court's order. It's just that it's a behavior that is unsustainable. We as Indians, understandably, have a culture of consumption of milk, but that does not give us the excuse of shoving bad health practices. It's the same logic that people give for animal sacrifice also. We've been doing it for so many years. Let's just continue doing it. By and by, we need to switch to more sustainable and scientifically sort of robust practices if we need to survive as a as a community or sustain ourselves as a civilization for longer. Of course, tomorrow this change will not come. Of course, next year not everybody is going to stop consuming dairy or keeping animals the way they do. But awareness will then allow people to make informed choices. Some people will continue to make uninformed choices, or despite information, they will make choices that are unsustainable or unhealthy. But that's completely an individual's choice. But we need to know that milk being circulated in the market comes from dairies that are completely unregulated. There are 4 licenses required for any dairy to operate. One is a food safety license, which they need to conspicuously display outside the dairy. None of them have it. They need to have a consent to operate, consent to establish from the State Pollution Control Board, or in the case of Delhi, the Delhi Pollution Control Committee. None of them have it. They need to have cattle premises registration under the Prevention of Cruelty to Animals Act. One of the rules require it. None of them have it. And the 4th is a license from MCD, so that their siting criteria, etc., can be looked at. Probably a couple of hundred have it among 7,000 or so in India, in Delhi. So if any other food grain or anything were coming, or consumer item were coming from such unregulated sources, we would have cracked down on it. But this milk, which we feed to our children, which we feed to our elderly, which we feed to pregnant women, we don't care if it's substandard, but we want to pay less for it. Standard does not matter. Let's just squeeze cost, and cost जब squeeze होती है तो कोई तो pay करता है. Farmer नहीं pay करेगा, milk companies. Today, Amul is the fastest growing FMCG in the country. They have the maximum profits of any FMCG, but they would not make one single gaushala for retired cattle. They will make schools, they will make hospitals, but they will not make one single gaushala for cattle. That will be kept by some NGO. Why? It's just intuitively so unfair that people want to shut their eyes and say कि हमें तो सस्ता चाहिए. तो उससे अच्छा है कि हम आँख ही बंद कर लें फिर हर प्रकार की cruelty.
Totally, ma'am, totally. And we also require amendments in the Food Adulteration Act as well. The kind of milk that we're consuming, it does require amendment there also.
There is no Food Adulteration Act. There is a Food Safety and Standards Act 2006,
That's what I meant.
Which requires under its 2011 regulations, there are detailed requirements for dairies to be regulated. But the point is, पूरा एक chapter है Food Safety and Standards, Licensing and Registration Regulations 2011 का chapter 3 पढ़ेंगे तो उसमें पूरी requirement है कि dairy को क्या क्या comply करना चाहिए, कितना cleanliness होना चाहिए, कैसे milking stations अलग होने चाहिए, वगैरह वगैरह. But zero consumers asked for it, and the food safety people don't check it enough, and there is no will in the country to regulate, because we have the romantic notion of a dairy in our mind na कि वो गाय तो बहुत अच्छे से रखते हैं, so nobody even cares about having. And adulteration is not the only problem with milk. Milk has specific standards under the Food Safety and Standards Authority. उनके standards हैं, वो standard match नहीं करता आज का दूध, और वो स्टैंडर्ड्स वैसे ही काफी लो हैं. अगर उन लो स्टैंडर्ड्स को भी हम मैच नहीं कर पा रहे हैं तो इमेजिन हमारा मिल्क कि export market बहुत कम है. Developed countries don't take our milk products. Only the Middle East or the Southeast Asian countries take our milk products because their standards are as low as ours. But developed countries will not take our milk because they find our milk substandard. And even if that substandard milk से भी कम आ जाता है, and then we say कि no, but then price is the sensitive thing. I think somewhere, at least starting with the urban crowd, we have to start asking for better. Okay.
Sure, ma'am. Thanks. We can have next question probably.
Yeah.
Yes. Ma'am, when we talk about the animal welfare, so one of the major reasons behind lack of animal welfare is often tied to funding shortages and inadequate resources amongst the NGOs. So, can this be cured by bringing in animal welfare under the CSR activities? Because somewhere it is directly influencing human lives as well, whether it is diseases or biodiversity, etc.
Yeah.
Can we do something for it?
Already
And should
done.
it be done?
Already done. In 2016, Ministry of Consumer Affairs came out, Corporate Affairs came out with the notification, including animal welfare as a legitimate head under CSR activities. And a lot of companies do contribute to animal welfare under CSR. The point is, most organizations don't have the skill to approach corporates and apply for such grants. So, दिक्कत resources की नहीं है, दिक्कत skill की है. Corporate Affairs Ministry ने वो notify तो 2016 में ही कर दिया था.
Okay, yeah, because I read only 0.6% of spendings are under this category.
Yes. Spending इसमें कम है because most organizations just like to hoard a lot of animals, injured animals. India में अभी ये हमारा जो animal welfare movement है is very nascent, and just like most people, when they think about animal welfare, they just think about street dogs. इसी तरह animal welfare shelters या activities भी 90% or more such activities are basically around sheltering, and it's done by people who just have bleeding hearts, but they don't have skills to be able to grow beyond that, to be able to apply for such grants, because it requires meticulous paperwork. You need to have compliance of Income Tax Act under. You need to have your 12A registration. You have to have 8TG. You have to have, if you are looking for international funding, you need to have FCRA. You need to give thorough utilization reports. Most of these little shelters that run, they don't even have a chartered accountant. They don't even file their returns. Some of them are not even incorporated. तो उनको क्या ही मिल सकता है अगर उनका कागज नहीं कंप्लीट है, because CSR obtain करना भी एक heavy exercise है. तो उसका स्किल नहीं है, इसलिए कोई अप्लाई नहीं करता. I have through the fellowship tried a lot for more and more organizations to gather the skill so that they can get more and more foundations and corporates to contribute towards animal welfare, not just in sheltering but in high impact solutions also.
Thank you.
Good evening, ma'am. Thank you, Uncle. I actually had several questions, ma'am. The first one is that uh, most of the direct cruelties find place in PCA Section 11. But what about indirect cruelties? Like, do they find any space in statutes or any judgments? Like,
Give an example.
like plastic pollution or pollution of any kind. Like, I saw an accident of a cow slaughtered on a railway track. Not slaughtered, actually, died. And all I could see was dense plastic rather than organs. Like, what about that, ma'am?
Yeah. Now, again, those are the refinements in law that are yet to be made in the country. For instance, अब हम plastic free zone बोलते हैं, तो वहाँ पे retailers को पकड़ते हैं. Retailers के ऊपर छोटे-छोटे fine लगा देते हैं, plastic free. But there is no provision to catch the manufacturers. there is no provision to shut down the factories where such plastic is being generated. Plastic is probably one of the biggest enemies of our country or the planet. Not only do you, the polythene that you see, but also the microplastics that are present in your water, in your mineral water bottle. There are so many microplastics that are present in vegetables because they have basically pervaded every aspect of our life. There is some plastic that we see, हमें गाय के पेट में तो दिखता है, हमारे पेट में भी बहुत प्लास्टिक है, माइक्रोप्लास्टिक्स हैं जो हमारे सेल्स में जमा हो गए हैं. But somehow there is no regulatory regime yet to comprehensively tackle it, and internationally it's just something that is considered a wink wink nudge nudge, let's not talk about it type of situation. The victims of it, yes, are the street animals that get to consume it, but they are not the only victims. Like I said, there are microplastics in every creature that exists on this planet.
Good evening, ma'am. I have like two very short, quick questions. First, could you like share about like some tips about funding and collaboration mechanisms when we are seeking collaborations from government organization or ministries? And second, I would love to hear your thoughts on uh, like like you talked about solutions. So I see that we have in West we have these cage free eggs also. Like we of course can share ask citizens to like this is how the egg industry, how cruel this egg industry is, but they'll forget the next day. That's human nature. So why not have such industrial practices like cruelty free eggs,
Okay,
oxytocin free
I'll
milk?
answer these two questions with one short thing.
Okay.
So governments are always happy to collaborate with civil society, provided the civil society is solution oriented. So most people, especially in animal welfare, when they approach the government, it's only with complaints, complaints, complaints. So if you go to the government with the solution and say, "Ki, here is a problem, here is how we can resolve it, and here is what we can do for you. What are we bringing to the table?" Then there is a collaboration possible. So recently we've had a collaboration of this kind with two governments, Tamil Nadu and Uttar Pradesh. For instance, we went to Uttar Pradesh. We said that, cage-free eggs need to be produced, but cage-free eggs karne ke liye, agar if you need to keep birds in large numbers without the use of battery cages, then it requires a certain amount of training of farmers. And therefore, we are happy to bring in that training aspect, provided the UP government creates a model cage-free farm and training center for farmers, and we would do the training of farmers. Because we have the knowledge, we can bring in international experts, etc. And then we have now signed an MOU, my organization called People for Animals Public Policy Foundation, along with Government of UP and the Central Avian Research Institute, which is the apex scientific body on birds in India, central government body. We got a tripartite MOU to basically come together and train farmers on cage-free egg practices. Cage-free eggs are available at this time anywhere, even on Blinkit. You can see it in malls or whatever. It's just a matter of choice, thoughtful choice that people can make to pay a little extra. But that with that money, the birds get to have a little more space in the 1.5 years life of theirs. They are able to perch, they are able to have access to a nest box, and they're able to walk and dust bathe, which is something of a very intrinsic behavior of hens. Sometimes people forget that basically egg kya hota hai? Egg is like every mammal has female mammal has her period. That's what an egg is. It's just that, and the ovulation of the hen. And like every other female animal, this is a vulnerable time for the female, and she wants to do it in hiding. She wants access to a nest box. And in a battery cage, even that limited dignity is not available to the hen. In fact, all birds you see, they build nests only because they want to be secure and safe, not only for the chick, but also for themselves. While they're laying an egg, because they're extremely vulnerable at that time. In battery cages, hens just feel completely, it's a life, like I said, worse than death. They remain in such intense stress that they cannibalize their own self out of frustration. Imagine if you were tied to a chair for the rest of your life. How would you feel? So options are available, and governments partner with organizations that not only come up with solutions, but are willing to be part of those solutions.
Okay.
Abolitionist approach क्यों नहीं? हम खाते ही नहीं हैं. तो बेस्ट केस सिनेरियो तो यही है. While best case scenario is, do not use ASF or animal sourced foods or animal sourced products. I myself don't use leather or whatever. So if you think that there is an ethical, you know, plateau that you have reached, okay, I'm not going to use animals at all because it ethically violates my principles, that would be best. But for most people, the use of animals is sort of unavoidable. You know, not everybody has come to that level of I wouldn't say evolution, but that would be that would be insulting too. But most people have not reconciled with welfare or, you know, existence or suffering of animals to that extent. So they want to continue to using animals. So at least there would be some amount of responsibility stitched in. Now, world over, there have been lots of studies that which approach works better, whether an abolitionist approach works better, or like हम अगर सरकार के पास जाएं, यूपी गवर्नमेंट के पास जाएं और हम उनसे कहें कि आप अंडा बंद कर दीजिए, आप पूरे देश में अंडा बंद कर दीजिए, तो वो कहेंगे आप जाइए यहाँ से. तो फिर कुछ भी नहीं होगा. तो हम एटलीस्ट कुछ 10-12 करोड़ मुर्गियों की जिंदगी के 150 दिन अगर हम कुछ बेहतर बना सकते हैं, तो why not go with a welfare approach? So it's both ways. We do, as an organization, believe in some amount of outreach for, you know, completely abolishing animal sourced food, but that is voluntary, है ना? वो तो जिसका मन करे तो करे, नहीं करे तो ना करे. But at least we try to enforce some responsible, ethical farming practices to limit the amount of cruelty that is going on. अब आज के डेट में हम बोलेंगे कि दूध बंद कर दीजिए, तो कोई करेगा क्या? Probably कुछ लोग करेंगे, वो उनके लिए voluntary choice है, उसके लिए we're giving out information. But at least with the governments, when you're talking to industry and government, you cannot go with an abolitionist approach because that doesn't yield result. So there we say, at least abide by this much. Yes, of course. Of course, cage-free does not mean cruelty-free, because at the end of 1.5 years, those birds will still get killed, right? So, but at least उनका जिंदगी के कई घंटे, 150 दिनों के कितने घंटे होंगे, वो cruelty में नहीं बीतेंगे. That's the only thing. But also in our Indian legal system, there is no concept of right of animal. जस्टिस राधाकृष्णन ने 2014 के जजमेंट में सुप्रीम कोर्ट में बहुत क्लेवरली स्टिच टुगेदर किया था आर्टिकल 21 के साथ राइट्स ऑफ एनिमल्स. बट it was not it could not withstand the scrutiny of the constitutional bench judgment in 2023. Hence it is important that while we work towards the rights of animals, we also be conscious of the fact that currently the regime is just of welfare. the legal regime. So you can hold the government accountable only to welfare. Kyunki unnecessary pain and suffering is still allowed by law in this country. There is no personhood given to any animal. There were two judgments, both of Justice Rajiv Sharma. Once when he was in Uttarakhand High Court, Narayan Dutt Bhatt wala matter, and once in Chandigarh High Court when the matter was some Colonel Kaptan Singh or something like that. In both those matters, Justice Rajiv Sharma allowed personhood for animals, but then both those judgments were stayed by the Honorable Supreme Court. There is no concept of personhood. There have been habeas or petitions filed against an elephant in the New York Supreme Court, but even that got defeated. So अभी तो हमारी सबसे ज़्यादा progressive countries में भी rights का concept नहीं है. So it'll be jumping the gun to go to rights at this time, while we create a civil society which is educated enough to understand this, and while we educate our lawmakers on rights, we can, in practice, move only towards welfare. In theory and in spirit, we should move towards rights.
Good evening, ma'am. My question would be a continuation of the welfareism and abolitionist one. I am a Bengali, so and my culture has a huge consumption of non-veg food. I also consume non-veg food, but I do believe that animals need to be protected and they should not suffer for food. Like we can kill it for food, but they should not suffer. So can my values align to a animal protection organization, or should I turn vegan?
So I was a non-vegetarian when I decided to join or do something about animals. Basically because I was grown in an environment where I was given the liberty to eat animals, and I was a voracious non-veg eater. I used to make fun of vegetarians. So ऐसे था, but जब मैंने देखा उसका practical aspect, when I saw the kind of ways in which animals are raised, animals are transported, animals are slaughtered, I just figured that there is no way to get a nicely killed animal ever. There is no way to alienate welfare from, alienate cruelty from slaughter or from any meat. Meat has intrinsically got cruelty in it. So while this is a good starting point that you are at least here to listen to this, I would suggest do your own reading. Watch some documentaries, read about how animals are raised, not दूसरे देशों में, हमारे देश में क्या हो रहा है, what is coming to your plate. Look at the cruelty aspect of it, look at the health aspect of it, see whether your the fish that is coming to your plate is laden with heavy metals, with antibiotics. Is it giving you antimicrobial resistance? Can there be or is there in practice any farm that is not using human sewage as food for fish, or not shoving antibiotics into fish ponds, aquaculture ponds, or not killing them cruelly? Which is the slaughterhouse which is stunning animals and not killing one animal in front of the other? Those are the provisions of the Slaughterhouse Rules 2001. Which is the slaughterhouse in this country that upholds the provisions given in the Food Safety and Standards Act? None. Zero. So if you align with welfare, you would then at least have to ensure welfare. How are you ensuring welfare? By at least having the law abided by. जिस दिन आप वो क्वेश्चन अपने आप के लिए आंसर करेंगे, आपको इस सवाल का जवाब मिल जाएगा. दिशा. Okay, next question. We'll just take two questions very, very quickly. I think Kavya, I can see Kavya and Disha.
Hello, ma'am. Thank you for your enlightening session that you conducted today, as well as the event the other day. It is a real pleasure to listen to you. Actually, my sister is a vegan, but I am on my way to be. So I have two questions, ma'am. One question is that the Spanish movie Amores Perros, it focused on dog fighting, how cruel the dog fighting was, and how the dogs suffered. So the Mexican government, it took the movie very seriously and it banned dog fights. Do you think we can do something similar with our soft culture, ma'am? And second question, ma'am, when in my previous campus at Hyderabad, EFL University, we used to take care of the dogs and cats on campus with a lot of love and care. And whenever a dog used to repeatedly get pregnant or a cat used to repeatedly get pregnant, we used to make a move to try to neuter them. And there were many people who opposed us. What do you feel, ma'am, about this idea that neutering is cruelty? Is it a right concept or is it something muddled up?
Okay. So, dog fighting or animal fighting, like I said, is a cognizable offense in India anyway. All kinds of animal fights are, banned, you can say, or prohibited by law anyway in
Yes, ma'am.
India. For anything else, if there is a social movement, and, through media such as even films, if more, such thoughts get amplified, the governments do act on it. So let's see if a
Yes, ma'am.
diverse country like that can stitch together a uniform public opinion by the means of a film or something. But fights are, in any case, illegal in India. And second is animal birth control. It's probably the best thing that you can do to a homeless or even a pet animal. I have 4 cats in the house. They're all neutered because when an animal is not neutered, it undergoes repeated pregnancies, repeated childbirth, repeated, separation from its babies. Sometimes the baby die because sometimes she's unable to look after them. Sometimes dogs and animals die in childbirth. They suffer from problems of the uterus, such as pyometra and TVT, all kinds of dirty diseases they get because they're outside. The nutrition in their body is constantly getting sucked out into making babies. Imagine if you were supposed to have like 20 children in your lifetime. How would your body react to that? You would probably be, just gone. Your bones and your blood would just forever be feeding the fetuses. So it's good for the dogs to undergo neutering, but then neutering should be done in a place which is compliant with the Animal Birth Control Rules 2023. Currently in Delhi, not even one ABC center, and there are 20. दिल्ली में 20 एबीसी सेंटर्स हैं, एक भी के पास प्रोजेक्ट रिकॉग्निशन नहीं है एज पर द एनिमल बर्थ कंट्रोल रूल्स 2023. They are all illegally functioning. We've taken that matter also to the High Court, and High Court asked the Chief Secretary to resolve the situation. The Chief Secretary has minuted in his meeting that we agree that none of them are registered. Hence, they are all doing ghablabazi. They don't have CCTVs in the operation theaters. They don't have CCTVs in the kennels, which are mandatory by law, according to the Animal Birth Control Rules 2023. They don't, sometimes use the correct kind of sutures, the correct kind of anesthesia. कभी कम anesthesia में काम चला लिया तो कभी घटिया anesthesia use किया. एक सस्ता वाला आता है वो. या सूचर्स में गड़बड़ कर दिया, क्योंकि अगर हम वाइक्रल यूज करेंगे जो हाई क्वालिटी का सूचर है, ज्यादा महंगा पड़ेगा, तो चलो फिर कैटगट से सिल देते हैं. Those kind of shortcuts these organizations take because they have no oversight, no monitoring, no evaluation. And hence, I would say when you are taking animals, it's great to have animals neutered, but please make sure that they are going to a responsible place where they are coming back zinda, and you are doing some amount of post-operative vigilance on these animals.
Thank you so much, ma'am.
Okay, are we done?
Ma'am, my question is regarding the illegal and unregistered slaughterhouses. I guess that you have given a slight answer in the previous question only, that these illegal slaughterhouses, they are found in like every street corners, and they fail to adhere to the prescribed guidelines like giving anesthesia and covering up the flesh. So I just want to know that what immediate action that should be taken, or there are any like regulatory methods regarding this.
बहुत सारा है regulatory method, some from the health angle, some from the food safety angle, some from the environment angle, some from the cruelty angle, because this matter was taken up by the Honorable Supreme Court in a matter titled Common Cause versus Union of India, and the court asked for a compendium to be made of all the laws that are applicable on slaughterhouses. And at that time, I was assisting the ASG, so I remember Ms. Pinky Anand. I was the one who kind of put the entire compendium together, and I'd be happy to share it with you, which is that compendium has been mandated by the court to be followed by every single state government. So in Delhi, यहाँ के perspective से अगर मैं बताऊँ तो there is only one slaughterhouse which is licensed by the DPCC and Food Safety and Standards Authority, which is the Ghazipur slaughterhouse. Major problems over there. Clearly, while it is licensed, it's not abiding by the conditions of the license, and it is hardly being able to cater to the domestic demand, because domestic demand is for hens or chicken meat, while the slaughterhouse slaughters only buffaloes and goats and sheep. So about 3 to 5 lakh hens get slaughtered illegally in the Ghazipur Murga Mandi, and then there are Azadpur Mandi and Indra Market and all kinds of INA market, Chitranjan Park Market, where they get slaughtered as well. The good thing would be to just go through that compendium, at least go through the index of the compendium. You'll know the regulatory regime. I'll send across a concise version of all the regulations that are applicable on slaughterhouses also to Ankur, and you can read it. And then whenever you come across a place where animals are being slaughtered, raise a complaint to the respective authority.
I will be very quick. Ma'am, we talked about the use of horses and to make antivenoms and use of animals for research or studies. But that cannot be stopped immediately unless until some solutions or some alternatives are there. So are there some alternatives? And ma'am, one more question is that killing animals is bad. Okay, I understand that. But what about invasive alien species? Or what about animals that are declared pests? So ma'am, please answer these questions.
मेरी नजर में तो हम ही हैं इन्वेसिव स्पीसीज सबसे ज्यादा. ह्यूमन से ज्यादा इन्वेसिव कोई है ही नहीं. हम जहां गए हमने तबाही मचा दी है. So, but anyway, invasive alien species don't naturally venture into उन्होंने गैलापागोस आइलैंड से कहीं और तो कहीं उड़ान नहीं भर ली. कोई लेकर ही गया कहीं से किसी जानवर को. अगर हम ही अब ब्रिटिशर्स ने ऑस्ट्रेलिया को कॉलोनाइज किया तो वहां रैबिट्स ले जाके छोड़ दिए. फिर उसके बाद वो रैबिट्स इन्वेसिव एलियन स्पीसीज बन गए. फिर उनको मारना पड़ा. फिर केमिकल्स इजाद किए उनको पॉइजन करने के लिए. तो ये परेशानियां हम ही बनाते हैं अपने लिए, और उसके बाद हम ही उनको परेशानी बता के उनको मारना शुरू कर देते हैं. हम अमेरिकन ने पता नहीं कौन कौन से एनाकोंडास ले जाके अपने एवरग्लेड्स में छोड़ दिए, और फिर उनको वहां पे वो इन्वेसिव स्पीसीज लगने लगे. छोड़े भी क्यों? They brought them as pets. They used to, because keeping wildlife as pets was allowed, so unregulated. They kept bringing large pythons from South America, and then people used to just get fed up of them and leave them in the Everglades. And finally, they became invasive species. यहाँ पे catfish की problem है इंडिया में. Thai and African catfish होता है, वो कुछ लोगों को खाने में बहुत पसंद है. So, but they are so invasive that you leave a few of them in the natural water bodies and they would just eradicate all your other fish. So, these are problems that we create. If we just stop meddling with the animals would be way better. There would be no invasive species. What was the first question?
Ma'am, first question was about use of animals in antivenoms and for research.
So, uske liye we have been talking to Ministry of Science and Technology and the Department of Biotechnology as well. It requires a recombinant solution for creating anti-venom. And since snake venom is not inorganic, it is organic in nature, it is always, har saap ka venom alag prakar ka hota hai. It's a combination of various kinds of toxins, and even the same species of snake in different geographical locations would have its venom slightly different in toxicity from snakes of other places. Hence, the kind of anti-venom that they get from horses is unmatched. However, it doesn't always work on snake bite cases, because कोई सांप को देखा नहीं होता है, किसी ने देखा नहीं होता है कौन सा सांप काट के गया, तो अब अगर आपने कोबरा ने काटा, आपने वाइपर का वेनम लगा दिया, एंटी वेनम, तो यूज नहीं होगा, वगैरह वगैरह. सो दिस इज अ मोर कॉम्प्लेक्स थिंग, बट इन मोस्ट थिंग्स जो हॉर्सेस में यूज होता था फॉर क्रिएटिंग vaccines for botulism, diphtheria, etc. All that has been done away with by use of recombinant methods, by creating synthetic doses. Now that synthetic methodology for snake venom is a little difficult, because snake venom is a combination of many compounds that differ from snake to snake and geography to geography. So they're still struggling with it. Oh my God, what is happening? My background sort of changed. Okay. So let's end this session here, and I look forward to many more sessions.
No, ma'am, please, one more doubt, ma'am. We talked about invasive alien species, but like they're already a problem now. Like we should save them, or we should save the local species.
Tell me a specific problem. Which species are you talking about?
For example, you talked about catfish. So if catfish are in abundance in some pond, then the local species won't survive there. So
my thumb rule is, and this is something that I have, after decades of work, figured out, that हर situation में net welfare देखना चाहिए. Net welfare कैसे होगा? एक जानवर को बचाने से, एक एग्जाम्पल बताती हूँ मैं जल्दी से. एक अफ्रीकन एलिफेंट को किसी ने गिफ्ट किया, कोई जापान या पता नहीं किसी ने एक अफ्रीकन एलिफेंट गिफ्ट किया, कीनिया, some country gifted to India, and now that African elephant is kept in the Delhi zoo. अब वो अकेला है, zoo rules के हिसाब से solitary जानवर नहीं रख सकते. So somebody went to court, some girl, misguided but probably a good heart, went to court indicating the problem कि अकेला है, इसको अकेला क्यों रखा है? सेंट्रल जू रूल्स के हिसाब से, रिकॉग्निशन ऑफ जू रूल्स के हिसाब से सॉलिटरी जानवर को नहीं रख सकते. सो द कोर्ट सेड, व्हाट इज योर सॉल्यूशन, व्हाट इज योर प्रेयर? शी हैड नो प्रेयर, शी जस्ट हैड अ प्रॉब्लम, दैट्स इट. सॉल्यूशन क्या हो सकता है? या तो इस हाथी को मार दें, यूथनाइज कर दें, तो क्या वो नेट वेलफेयर होगा? या तो हम एक और हाथी ले आए अफ्रीका से, क्योंकि अफ्रीकन एलिफेंट, इंडियन एलिफेंट से, while they look similar, they are not the same species even. They are very different. They cannot be mingled together. African elephant को Indian forest में नहीं छोड़ा जा सकता, invasive है. तो क्या हम एक और हाथी ले आए? कोई गारंटी नहीं है कि वो उसको पसंद करेगा या दोनों आपस में बेस्ट फ्रेंड्स बन जाएंगे. तो क्या हम इसको वहां छोड़ दें, अफ्रीका भेज दें? बट देन इसकी भी कोई गारंटी नहीं. गारंटी तो इस बात की है कि इट्स स्टेड हियर, इट्स कलेक्टेड द पैथोजेंस ऑफ दिस एनवायरनमेंट, इट वुड प्रोबेबली बी अ कैरियर ऑफ मेनी प्रॉब्लम्स व्हेन इट गोज बैक एंड स्प्रेड those germs to in the wild habitats of Africa. So what is the solution? There is no solution. Among cat, so hence जैसा है वैसे रहने देना चाहिए. एक हाथी को solitary रह रहा है, give it the best comfort till the end of its life. That would be the best outcome. For catfish, keeping those catfish, not a great idea, because there are way too many. Wherever such catfish are caught, intensive regulatory steps should be taken, and the existing batch of catfish which are either Thai or African, जो illegal हैं, they should be euthanized. यूथनेसिया की भी प्रोटोकॉल्स अभी फिश में बहुत रिफाइंड नहीं है. Some people say clove oil से यूथनाइज करना चाहिए. Clove oil is an anesthetic, and overdose of anesthetic would kill it. But imagine tons of clove oil you would need to kill a pond full of catfish. But then that's the solution I would go to. When we tell authorities कि ये तो sacrificial lot है, इसको तो खत्म करो. If you leave it out and allow it to grow in our ecosystems, many more deaths would happen. So net welfare इसमें है कि कम से कम जाने जाएं.
Thank you, ma'am.
Thank you so much, ma'am, for having this session and very peacefully and patiently answering all our doubts.
No,
I'm sure that, yeah, I'm definitely sure that most of the students would be really take this session as a fruitful session, and we will have you in the future, and we will collaborate with PFA in our future. Yeah, definitely.
Great. All the best for your exams, and whatever in today's talk touched your heart most, find out more about it. I have just given you little things. These are not complete stories. There is much more out there that you need to find out. So try and read about things, learn about things. There's so many wonderful documentaries on, open access media. Please educate yourself a lot more, and we'll have more interesting discussions in the future.
Thank you so much.
Bye-bye.
Thank you, ma'am.